I thought holding Kenneth's hand during graduation was the hardest thing we'd ever do. I was wrong, because holding his hand in front of his entire family, that was a completely different kind of terrifying, especially when nobody there knew we were together. Well, almost nobody. It had been almost 8 months since graduation. 8 months since the day Kenneth reached for my hand without thinking. 8 months since we'd stopped pretending we were just friends. Long distance wasn't easy. I lived in Chicago. Kenneth worked about 3 hours away in Indianapolis. Some weekends he'd drive to me. Other weekends, I'd drive to him. Every Friday became a countdown. Every Sunday became a goodbye. Neither of us liked Sundays. I hate leaving, Kenneth admitted one evening as we stood beside my apartment building. So do I. He pulled me into a hug. I'll see you next weekend. You better. I already requested Monday off. You did? He smiled. Thought we could make it a long weekend. I kissed him quickly. You keep spoiling me. I have 4 years to make up for. That still made me laugh. Kenneth loved reminding me that we'd accidentally spent years acting like a couple before either of us realized it. A month later, my phone rang while I was finishing work. Kenneth. You busy? Just leaving the office. I have a question. That sounds dangerous. It might be. I smiled. What is it? There was a pause, long enough that I stopped walking. My parents are having a barbecue next Saturday. Okay. They invited me? I would hope so. He laughed nervously. They asked if you were coming too. I blinked. Oh. Another silence. You don't have to. I know. They still think of you as family. I know. But, his voice became quieter. I don't want to introduce you as my best friend anymore. My heart skipped. You don't? He exhaled slowly. I'm tired of pretending. I leaned against my car. Kenneth, I don't want to hide you. Those 5 words hit me harder than I expected. For months, we'd only been open with a handful of close friends. Not because we were ashamed, because we wanted time. Time to figure things out. Time to build something solid before inviting everyone else into it. His parents had always loved me. That almost made it scarier. What if they're surprised? I asked quietly. They probably will be. What if they don't accept it? He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. Then we'll deal with it together. Together. That word always made everything feel a little less frightening. The entire week flew by. By Friday night, I was standing outside Kenneth's apartment with an overnight bag. He opened the door before I even knocked. There you are. He kissed me hello. It still amazed me how natural it felt. 8 months together, and I still smiled every single time. Inside, we ordered pizza and watched a movie neither of us actually paid attention to. Around midnight, Kenneth muted the television. We should probably talk. I figured. You nervous? A little. Me too. He sat beside me on the couch. My mom's going to ask questions. She always does. My dad will probably stay quiet. Until later. Exactly. We both laughed. I keep thinking about graduation, he admitted. Why? Because that was the first time I stopped worrying about what people thought? He looked at me. And I don't want to go backward. I reached for his hand. We won't. He intertwined our fingers. You promise? I promise. He smiled. I believe you. Saturday morning arrived much faster than either of us wanted. The drive to his parents' house felt strangely familiar. The same roads, the same small towns, the same gas station where we'd stopped dozens of times during college. Only this time, everything felt different. Kenneth rested one hand on the steering wheel. The other found mine on the center console. He squeezed it once. "I'm really glad you're here." I smiled. "I wasn't going to let you do this alone." He looked over for just a second. "I love you." The words came so naturally now. Still, they never failed to make my heart race. "I love you too." Neither of us knew exactly how the afternoon was going to go. We only knew one thing. By the end of the day, Kenneth's family would finally know that Emilio wasn't just his best friend anymore. He was the man he loved. The closer we got to Kenneth's parents' house, the quieter we became. Usually this drive was filled with music, stupid jokes, and arguments over which fast food place had the best fries. Today, the radio was barely audible. Kenneth tapped the steering wheel with his thumb, a habit he'd always had when he was nervous. "You've been doing that for the last 10 minutes, I said. "Hmm?" The tapping. He looked down at his hand and smiled sheepishly. "I didn't even notice. You always do it. You notice everything. I've had a lot of practice." He chuckled, but it didn't completely hide the nerves in his voice. "I still can't believe we're actually doing this." "We don't have to." He immediately shook his head. "No." His answer came so quickly that it caught me off guard. "I want to." He looked over at me for just a second. "I'm done pretending you're only my best friend." Those words settled warmly in my chest. For years, best friend had been enough. Now, it almost felt too small. About 20 minutes later, we turned onto the familiar street. I hadn't been here since graduation weekend. Nothing had changed. The same brick houses, the same basketball hoop in the driveway across the street, the same maple tree Kenneth used to complain about because it dropped leaves all over his dad's truck. "There it is," he said quietly. "His childhood home." My stomach tightened. "You okay?" He nodded once. "Just stay close." I smiled. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. He parked the truck but didn't reach for the door. Instead, he leaned back in his seat. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." I've imagined this conversation 100 different ways. And in every version, he laughed softly. "You were holding my hand." I looked down at the center console between us. Without saying anything, I reached across and intertwined our fingers. "There," he smiled. "That's better." We sat there another minute, saying nothing, just breathing. Then Kenneth took one last deep breath. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." The backyard was already full. His uncles were standing around the grill. Kids ran through the grass, chasing each other with water balloons. Someone had music playing from a portable speaker. It looked exactly like every barbecue I'd ever attended with Kenneth's family. The moment his mom spotted us, her face lit up. "There you are." She hurried across the yard and hugged Kenneth first, then me. "I'm so happy you came, Emilio. I wouldn't miss it. I was starting to think work had stolen both of you." Kenneth laughed. "It tried." His dad walked over carrying a plate of burger buns. "Good to see you, boys." He shook my hand before pulling Kenneth into a quick hug. "You hungry?" "Always," Kenneth answered. "Good." His dad smiled. "I made too much food." "Like every year." "Exactly." Everything felt normal, almost suspiciously normal. For the next hour, we slipped into the same routine we'd always had, helping set tables, refilling drinks, laughing with Kenneth's cousins. His little niece, Ava, immediately ran over. "Emilio," she wrapped her arms around my waist. "You came." "I promised I would." "Come see my drawings." Kenneth laughed. "Guess you've been replaced." I noticed. "You don't even seem upset." "I can't compete with crayons." Later that afternoon, Kenneth and I ended up standing near the back fence while everyone else ate, He looked toward his parents, who were talking with relatives across the yard. I should tell them. You can wait. I've been waiting 8 months. I looked at him. You don't have to force the moment. I know. But if I don't do it today, he sighed, I'll keep finding excuses. I understood. Fear had a way of disguising itself as better timing. Eventually, there was never a perfect moment, only a decision. Kenneth took a slow breath. Come with me? Of course. We walked toward the patio together. His parents looked up as we approached. His mom smiled. What are you two plotting now? Kenneth laughed nervously. Nothing. His dad immediately noticed. You look serious. Kenneth glanced at me, then back at them. There was actually something I wanted to tell you. His mom put down her drink. What is it? For just a second, Kenneth reached behind the table, where no one else could see. His fingers found mine. He squeezed my hand once, a silent reminder. We're doing this together. He looked back at his parents. His voice was calm, but I knew him well enough to hear the emotion underneath. Mom. Dad. There's something about Emilio I should have told you a long time ago. The entire backyard suddenly felt very quiet. There's something about Emilio I should have told you a long time ago. Kenneth's voice was steady, calmer than I expected. His mom looked between us, a curious smile still on her face. His dad quietly set his drink on the table. Neither of them interrupted. Kenneth took a slow breath. You've always known Emilio as my best friend. His mom nodded. Of course. And he still is. A tiny smile crossed his face. But he glanced at me for just a second. He's also my boyfriend. Silence. Not dramatic, not uncomfortable, just silence. The kind where everyone's brain is catching up at the same time. His mom blinked twice. His dad looked at Kenneth, then at me, then back at Kenneth again. I could hear children laughing somewhere on the other side of the yard. The barbecue continued around us. Nobody else had noticed. Finally, his mom spoke. Since when? Kenneth answered honestly. About 8 months? The graduation? He nodded. A little after that. She looked genuinely surprised. I had no idea. I know. His dad folded his arms. You've been together this whole time? Yes. And you're happy? Kenneth didn't hesitate. I've never been happier. Something softened in his dad's expression. He turned toward me. Emilio. Yes, sir? You make my son happy? My throat tightened. I do my best. He held my gaze for another second. Then he nodded once. Good. That was it. Just good. I almost couldn't believe it. Kenneth's mom was quieter, not upset, just thinking. After a long moment, she smiled sadly. I wish you would have told us sooner. Kenneth looked down. I know. I kept wondering why you two visited less often. She laughed softly. I thought adulthood had simply made you busy. It mostly did. She reached over and gently squeezed his arm. Were you scared? He looked at her. A little. She looked at me next. Were you? I smiled honestly. Terrified. That made her laugh. I can believe that. She shook her head. You boys? Kenneth looked confused. What? You've spent years acting like an old married couple. We both stared at her. She smiled wider. You really thought nobody noticed? Kenneth blinked. Noticed what? She started counting on her fingers. You finished each other's sentences. Kenneth looked embarrassed. You shared food without asking. I looked down. You always sat next to each other. Kenneth rubbed the back of his neck. You somehow remembered every tiny detail about the other. She laughed. And don't even get me started on graduation. Both of us froze. Graduation? Kenneth repeated. She nodded. I saw you holding Emilio's hand. My heart skipped. You did? I was standing right there. She pointed toward the driveway. I figured one of you was nervous. Kenneth looked completely stunned. You never said anything. I was waiting. For what? She smiled gently. For you two to figure it out yourselves. Before either of us could respond, Kenneth's dad cleared his throat. I'll admit. He looked slightly uncomfortable. I didn't see it? His wife laughed. I know. I genuinely thought they were just close friends. You also thought our neighbor was 30? He is 30. He's 47. Kenneth burst out laughing. I couldn't help joining him. His dad sighed dramatically. I notice practical things. You absolutely do. He looked back at us. I've never cared who Kenneth dates. He paused. I only care whether they're good to him. He looked directly at me. You've been good to him since the day you met. I swallowed hard. Thank you. He smiled faintly. Besides, he shrugged. I've trusted you for years already. Something inside my chest loosened. Months of worrying. Months of imagining the worst. And somehow, the conversation had become much simpler than either of us expected. Later that afternoon, the tension completely disappeared. Kenneth's cousins dragged us into another game of volleyball. His aunt insisted we take leftovers home. His uncle challenged Kenneth to another cornhole match. Everything felt normal. Wonderfully normal. At one point, Kenneth quietly bumped my shoulder. You okay? I looked around the yard. His parents were laughing with relatives. His niece was drawing chalk pictures on the patio. The grill still smelled like charcoal and burgers. I think so. You sure? I smiled. I kept expecting everything to change. And? I looked back at him. It didn't. He smiled too. No. It just became honest. For the first time all day, neither of us felt like we were hiding anymore. And somehow, that made Kenneth's childhood home feel even more like home for both of us. The barbecue didn't end until almost sunset. By then, the backyard had emptied. Kenneth's uncles had gone home. The kids had finally worn themselves out. Only a handful of people remained, helping clean up. I was carrying empty plates into the kitchen when Kenneth's mom walked in behind me. Emilio? I turned around. Yeah? She leaned against the counter with a warm smile. Can we talk for a minute? Of course. For some reason, my stomach tightened again. She noticed immediately. You can relax. I am relaxed. She laughed. No, you're pretending. I smiled sheepishly. I've never been very good at hiding it. No. She shook her head. You haven't. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into a kitchen drawer. I've been meaning to show you something. She pulled out a small stack of old photographs. What are these? Family pictures. She flipped through them before handing one to me. I couldn't help smiling. Kenneth and I were standing in front of a Christmas tree. Freshman year. We were both wearing ugly holiday sweaters his mom had forced us into. Kenneth had fake reindeer antlers on his head. I looked like I was trying not to laugh. You kept this? I keep all our family pictures. She smiled. You've been in them for years. I looked closer. There were dozens. Summer cookouts, Thanksgiving dinners, birthdays, camping weekends. I was in every one. You've always belonged here. Her voice was quiet. So today's conversation. She gently shook her head. Didn't change that. My throat tightened. I wasn't sure. I know. She stepped closer. Can I tell you a secret? I nodded. The first time Kenneth brought you home? I looked up. He talked about you for almost 3 hours. I laughed. He did not. Oh, he absolutely did. She started counting on her fingers. Emilio likes this. Emilio thinks that. Emilio says we should try this restaurant. She smiled. I finally looked at my husband and said, either they've become brothers overnight, or this friendship is going to be something special. I laughed quietly. I don't think either of us knew back then. No. She smiled. I don't think Kenneth did. She looked at me carefully. But I have wondered for years whether you already knew. I hesitated, then answered honestly. I knew I liked him. She nodded slowly. But I also knew he was straight. So I never expected anything. She reached over and squeezed my shoulder. That must have been hard. It wasn't always easy. No. She smiled sadly. I imagine it wasn't. Outside, Kenneth and his dad were folding tables. His dad looked up as we walked back into the yard. Everything okay? His mom smiled. We were just talking. Kenneth looked between us suspiciously. About me? Mostly. He groaned dramatically. I knew it. His mom laughed. You survived. Barely. His dad tossed him another folding chair. Less talking. More helping. Kenneth looked at me helplessly. See what I deal with? I think it's hilarious. Traitor. About an hour later, the yard was finally clean. Only Kenneth, his parents, and I remained. His dad disappeared into the garage for a moment, before coming back carrying an old cardboard box. I almost forgot. He handed it to Kenneth. Found this while cleaning. Kenneth frowned. My old stuff? Mostly college things. Kenneth opened it. Inside were notebooks, old hoodies, ticket stubs, and a worn blue notebook. His eyes widened. Oh, no. What? I asked. He quickly tried to close the box. Nothing. His mom laughed. Oh, let him see. No. Oh, yes. She reached into the box before Kenneth could stop her. Let's see. She flipped through the notebook, then smiled. I remember this. Kenneth looked horrified. Mom. She ignored him. You used to carry this everywhere freshman year. I frowned. A journal? Kenneth buried his face in one hand. Unfortunately. His mom opened to one of the first pages. Oh, she laughed softly. This one's about Emilio. Kenneth's face turned bright red. Please don't. His dad looked amused. Now I'm curious. So am I admitted. Kenneth sighed dramatically. My life is over. His mom looked at me. You can read it if he says yes. I immediately looked at Kenneth. I'm not reading anything you don't want me to. He stared at the notebook for several seconds, then slowly exhaled. You know what? He held it out toward me. Go ahead. You sure? He nodded. I don't really have secrets from you anymore. I carefully opened the notebook. The handwriting was unmistakably his. The date at the top read, September 18th, freshman year. I smiled. You've always had terrible handwriting. I know. I began reading silently. Then I stopped. My eyes widened. Kenneth noticed immediately. What? I looked up at him. You wrote. I looked back at the page to make sure I'd read it correctly. I met a guy named Emilio today. I don't know why, but I have a feeling he's going to be in my life for a long time. I looked at Kenneth. He smiled awkwardly. I guess. He rubbed the back of his neck. I was right. For a moment, neither of us noticed that his parents were smiling just as much as we were. I read that sentence 3 times. I met a guy named Emilio today. I don't know why, but I have a feeling he's going to be in my life for a long time. I looked up at Kenneth. You wrote this the day we met? He smiled, looking slightly embarrassed. Apparently. You don't remember? I remembered writing about college. He shrugged. I forgot what I actually wrote. His mom folded her arms with a grin. Keep reading. Kenneth groaned. Mom. What? I'm trying to protect what's left of my dignity. His dad laughed. I don't think you have much left. I couldn't help smiling as I turned the page. There were little entries from throughout freshman year. Nothing dramatic. Just moments. Emilio somehow convinced me to study instead of going out tonight. Annoyingly, he was right. I got an A on the quiz. I laughed. You admitted I was right? Kenneth sighed. That notebook clearly isn't reliable. His mom pointed at me. Read the next one. I looked down again. Emilio drinks way too much coffee. I'm convinced he's keeping the entire cafe in business by himself. I looked over at Kenneth. You've been judging my coffee habits since week 2? I was concerned. You were dramatic. I still am. Everyone laughed. The notebook continued. Small observations, tiny memories, things I'd completely forgotten. But one entry made me stop. It was dated almost a year later. Everyone thinks Emilio is quiet. They're wrong. He's only quiet until he trusts you. Then he laughs at the dumbest jokes, argues over the smallest things, and somehow makes every ordinary day more fun. I don't think he realizes how much better he makes my life. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until Kenneth spoke. Emilio? I slowly closed the notebook. You never said any of this. He smiled softly. I didn't know how. Later that evening, after saying goodbye to his parents, we climbed back into the truck. Neither of us started the engine. The notebook sat between us on the center console. Kenneth stared out the windshield. Well, I survived. You did. My parents didn't disown me. They definitely didn't. He smiled. I honestly thought today would feel heavier. I nodded. So did I. Instead, it felt lighter, like we'd finally put down something we'd been carrying for months. Kenneth reached for the notebook. I forgot how much I wrote. You noticed everything? I guess I did. You even noticed when I laughed differently. He looked confused. What? I opened the notebook again and found another page. You wrote. I read aloud. Today, Emilio laughed so hard he snorted. He's going to deny it happened. I'm never letting him forget it. Kenneth burst out laughing. Oh my God. I cannot believe you documented that. I documented everything. You absolutely did. He leaned back against the seat, still laughing. I sound obsessed. I raised an eyebrow. You said it. I did. The drive back to his apartment felt different than the drive there. Lighter. The windows were down. Music played softly. Kenneth rested one hand on the steering wheel while absent-mindedly humming along with the radio. About halfway home, he glanced toward me. You know. What? I've got another confession? Should I be worried? Probably. I laughed. What is it? He hesitated. I almost kissed you sophomore year. I turned toward him so quickly he started laughing. What? At the lake. My mind immediately went back. The weekend trip with our friends. The bonfire, the dock. We'd stayed up after everyone else had gone to sleep. You remember that? Of course I remember. You fell asleep sitting next to me. I smiled. I was exhausted. You leaned your head on my shoulder. I did. He nodded. I looked at you for about 5 minutes. I stared at him. And? I thought. He shook his head, smiling at himself. If he wasn't my best friend, I'd kiss him right now. Silence filled the truck. You thought that? 2 years before graduation? Yeah. What stopped you? You woke up. I laughed so hard I had to wipe tears from my eyes. Seriously? I'm completely serious. You've got terrible timing. I know. He laughed too. Then I convinced myself I was just tired. And after that, I ignored it. For 2 years? He nodded. I was really stubborn. You still are. Fair. That night we sat on the balcony outside his apartment. The city lights stretched across the distance. Neither of us had turned on the television. Neither of us looked at our phones. We simply talked. About college, about everything we'd missed, about all the moments that suddenly made sense. You know what my biggest regret is? Kenneth asked. What? I spent so much time trying to convince myself nothing had changed. He looked over at me. That I almost missed what was right in front of me. I intertwined my fingers with his. You didn't miss it. No. He smiled. I didn't. For a while, we simply sat there in comfortable silence. Then Kenneth looked at me with the same smile I'd first seen on orientation day. I've got another idea. I laughed. Your ideas usually change my life. I was hoping this one would. What is it? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded brochure. I looked down. Yosemite National Park. I frowned. A vacation? He nodded. We've always talked about taking a real trip together. We have. So? He smiled. What do you think about finally doing it? I looked at him, then at the brochure. Something told me this trip was going to become another memory we'd never forget. 3 weeks later, Kenneth pulled into my apartment parking lot at 5 a.m, exactly on time. Some things never changed. I climbed into the passenger seat, still half asleep. You look terrible, he said. I've been awake for 6 minutes. I can tell. You've had coffee? 2 cups. Only 2? I didn't want to overdo it. I stared at him. You've grown. I know. We both laughed. Between us sat a cooler full of snacks, 2 backpacks, and enough camping gear for 4 days. Yosemite. It had taken months to find a weekend that worked for both of us. Now it finally felt real. I still can't believe we're doing this, I said. Kenneth smiled. We've been talking about it since college. And now we're actually here. He reached over and squeezed my knee. No work. No emails. No phone calls. Just us. Those 2 words somehow sounded better every time he said them. The drive was long, really long. By the time we reached the park, we'd gone through 3 playlists, argued about which superhero movie was the most overrated, and stopped twice for gas. The mountains appeared slowly on the horizon. Even Kenneth went quiet. Wow. I know. Neither of us had expected them to look that massive. Towering cliffs, endless forests, waterfalls cutting through the rocks. It almost didn't look real. You picked a good place, I admitted. He looked very pleased with himself. I know. You've been waiting for me to say that. For 6 hours. After checking into a small cabin just outside the park, we spent the rest of the afternoon exploring nearby trails. Nothing difficult, just enough to stretch our legs after the drive. Kenneth insisted on stopping every few minutes to take pictures. You've become your mom. I'll take that as a compliment. You absolutely should. At one overlook, he handed me his phone. Take one of me. You've asked 3 different strangers already. They all cut off my head. They absolutely did not. They did emotionally. I rolled my eyes. Stand over there. He smiled and walked toward the railing. The afternoon sun caught the mountains behind him. I lifted the phone. Smile. Instead of smiling, he looked straight at me. Not the camera. Me. What are you doing? Looking at my favorite view. I lowered the phone. That was unbelievably cheesy. It worked, though. It absolutely did not. I felt my face warming. He laughed. I love making you blush. You've become insufferable. And yet, he walked back over and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You're still smiling. I hated that he was right. The next morning, we decided to tackle one of the longer trails. The ranger at the visitor center studied the map. About 6 hours round trip. Kenneth nodded confidently. We've got plenty of water. And stay on the marked trail. We will. The ranger smiled. You'd be surprised how many people don't. Kenneth looked at me. We're smarter than that. I laughed. Let's hope so. The trail started easily enough. Wide paths, clear signs, other hikers passing every few minutes. We talked about everything. Future vacations, whether we'd eventually live in the same city, what kind of apartment we'd want someday. I vote for somewhere with a balcony, Kenneth said. I knew you were going to say that. You like balconies too. I do. And a dog. I definitely want a dog. What kind? I thought for a moment. Golden Retriever. He grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. You already had a name picked out, didn't you? Maybe. I laughed. Kenneth? What? You've planned our future dog before we've even planned where we'll live. He shrugged innocently. I like being prepared. By early afternoon, the trail became much quieter. The crowds disappeared. The trees grew thicker. We hadn't seen another hiker for almost 40 minutes. Kenneth unfolded the map. I think we're close. You've said that 3 times. This time, I mean it. I don't trust your sense of direction. My sense of direction is excellent. At that exact moment, we reached a fork in the trail. There was only one problem. One of the trail signs had fallen onto the ground. Kenneth frowned. Well, I looked at the map. This wasn't here? No. He scratched the back of his neck. I think it's the left path. You think? I'm fairly confident. I smiled. Fairly isn't very reassuring. He looked between both trails. They both kind of look right. That's usually how getting lost starts. He laughed. We're not getting lost. I looked around. The forest was completely silent. Towering pines surrounded us in every direction. Somewhere far away, I could hear water rushing through a river. Maybe we should check the GPS. Kenneth pulled out his phone. No signal. He frowned. That's unfortunate. I checked mine. Nothing. We looked at each other, then back at the 2 identical-looking trails. For the first time all weekend, neither of us was smiling. Kenneth looked at his phone again. Still nothing. No signal, he muttered. I know. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked at the 2 trails again. I really thought I knew which way. I smiled faintly. I know you did. He sighed. I hate being wrong. I've noticed. He laughed under his breath. Thanks for the support. You're welcome. For a moment, we just stood there. The forest was almost unnaturally quiet. No voices, no footsteps, only the wind moving through the trees. Kenneth unfolded the paper map again. The ranger said this trail loops back. He also said to stay on the marked path. Fair point. I looked around. The sign probably fell recently. Maybe. He crouched beside it. The wooden post had snapped clean off. The arrows were scratched enough that they were almost impossible to read. So, he stood up. Left or right? I looked at both paths. I honestly have no idea. For the first time all weekend, neither of us had an answer. We should stay calm, Kenneth said. I am calm. He looked at me. No, you're pretending. I smiled. I learned from you. That made him laugh. Okay, fair. We decided to take a short break before making a decision. A small stream ran beside the trail, so we sat on a fallen log and drank some water. Neither of us said much. Finally, Kenneth broke the silence. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For getting us into this." I frowned. "You didn't?" "I picked the trail." We both agreed. I should have paid more attention. I nudged his shoulder. "We're not stranded. Yet. We're temporarily confused." He looked at me. "That's the most engineer thing you've ever said." I know. It actually made me feel better. Good. After comparing the map one more time, we chose the trail on the left. It seemed to match the elevation lines a little better. At least, that was our best guess. For the first 15 minutes, everything seemed fine. The path was clear. There were occasional footprints in the dirt. Then, the trail became narrower. The brush grew thicker. Kenneth slowed to a stop. "I don't like this." "Neither do I." There hadn't been a trail marker in almost 20 minutes. "We should turn around." He nodded immediately. No argument from me. We retraced our steps, or at least, we tried to. After another half hour, neither of us recognized anything. The fallen tree we'd walked past? Gone. The stream? Gone. The fork in the trail? Also gone. Kenneth slowly stopped walking. "Emilio." "Yeah?" "I think..." He looked around. "We're actually lost." The words hung in the air. Oddly, I didn't panic. Maybe because Kenneth was with me. Maybe because we still had supplies. Maybe because panicking wouldn't help. "We'll figure it out." He looked at me. "You really believe that?" "I believe in us." Something about those words made him smile. "You always know what to say." Not always. Most of the time. The afternoon slowly faded into evening. We found a wider clearing near the stream we'd eventually rediscovered. Neither of us wanted to keep walking after the light disappeared. Kenneth unpacked the emergency gear we'd brought. "I'm really glad you insisted on bringing this." I smiled. "You called me over-prepared." I was wrong. "You were." He laughed. "I've admitted that a lot lately." "You've grown." Within an hour, we'd managed to pitch the small emergency tent. Nothing fancy, just enough shelter for one night. Kenneth looked around the clearing. "I'll get some firewood." "I'll help." "No." He shook his head. "Stay here." "I'm coming." He smiled. "I know you are." 20 minutes later, we had a small fire burning. The orange light danced across the trees. The forest suddenly felt less intimidating. Dinner consisted of protein bars and trail mix. Kenneth looked at his food dramatically. "I miss pizza." "We've been here one day." "I miss civilization." I laughed. "I'll order you the biggest pizza you've ever seen tomorrow." "If we find tomorrow." "We will." He looked at me carefully. "You really aren't scared." I thought about it. "I am." "You don't look it." I stared into the fire. "I've spent 4 years watching you solve impossible problems." He smiled softly. "So?" "So if I had to get lost with one person..." I looked up. "I'm glad it was you." His expression changed, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. He reached across the fire and quietly took my hand. "I feel exactly the same." Night fell quickly beneath the trees. The stars peeked through gaps in the branches overhead. The fire crackled softly between us. Neither of us felt like sleeping yet. Kenneth leaned back against a log. "Can I tell you something?" "You can tell me anything." He smiled. "I was actually planning something for this trip." "What kind of something?" He reached into his backpack. For a second, I thought he was looking for another snack. Instead, he pulled out a small velvet box. My heart immediately started racing. Kenneth looked down at it before looking back at me. "I was going to wait until tomorrow." He laughed nervously. I had this whole plan. I stared at the box. Kenneth? I was going to ask you after we reached the overlook. His voice was barely above a whisper. Turns out, he looked around the dark forest. Life had other plans. He slowly opened the box. Inside, a simple silver ring caught the light from the campfire. I couldn't speak. Kenneth smiled, even though his own eyes were beginning to glisten. So, he took a slow breath. I guess this isn't exactly the romantic mountain view I imagined. He looked directly into my eyes. But I don't really care where we are. As long as it's with you. He held the ring gently in his hand. Emilio, will you marry me? For a moment, I honestly forgot where we were. The forest disappeared. The campfire disappeared. Even the cold night air disappeared. All I could see was Kenneth, holding a small silver ring in hands that were shaking just enough for me to notice. Neither of us spoke. I don't think either of us knew how. Finally, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I didn't laugh, I was probably going to cry. Kenneth smiled nervously. That's not exactly the response I rehearsed. You rehearsed this? For weeks. I wiped at my eyes. You brought a ring into the mountains? I've been carrying it around for almost a month. A month? He nodded. I kept waiting for the perfect moment. I looked around at the trees surrounding us. The perfect moment? He smiled. I was thinking somewhere with a better view. I shook my head, still smiling through tears. You idiot. Probably. You got us lost. I definitely did. You made me eat protein bars for dinner. I know. And now you're proposing in the middle of the woods. He laughed. When you list it like that, it sounds terrible. It really does. For a second, we simply looked at each other. Then I took one step closer. I don't care where we are. His smile faded into something softer. You don't? I gently took the ring from his hand. I would have said yes in a parking lot. He laughed quietly. I would have said yes on graduation day. His eyes widened. Really? I nodded. I've wanted a future with you since long before either of us admitted how we felt. The emotion in his eyes was impossible to miss. So, I smiled. Does this answer your question? I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Kenneth stared at my hand, then back at me. I didn't actually say it. He laughed through tears. No, you didn't. I took both of his hands. Kenneth Walker, I would love to marry you. For the first time since I'd known him, Kenneth was completely speechless. Then he wrapped both arms around me so tightly, I almost lost my balance. I love you. His voice cracked. I love you so much. I love you too. He kissed me, slowly, gently, while the fire crackled beside us. It wasn't the proposal either of us had imagined. Somehow, it was better. The next morning, we woke to voices. Hello? Anybody out there? Kenneth sat upright immediately. Did you hear that? I definitely heard that. A park ranger appeared through the trees moments later. There you are. Behind him were two more rangers. We've been looking for you since yesterday evening. Kenneth immediately stood. We're so sorry. The ranger smiled. Happens more often than you'd think. He looked around our campsite. You two handled yourselves well. We figured staying put after dark was smarter. It absolutely was. As we packed our gear, the ranger noticed my left hand. His eyes landed on the ring. He smiled. Looks like you had quite a night. Kenneth laughed. You could say that. The ranger grinned. Well, he looked around the forest. I've seen proposals in some beautiful places. He pointed toward the mountains. But this one's definitely going to be memorable. It already is, I said. A week later, we drove to Kenneth's parents' house again. This time, we weren't nervous. His mom opened the front door. You boys are back already? Kenneth smiled. We have news. She looked between us. What kind of news? Without saying anything, I held up my left hand. Her eyes immediately found the ring. She gasped. Oh. She covered her mouth. Oh my goodness. Kenneth's dad walked into the hallway. What's going on? His wife pointed toward my hand. He looked, then broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen on him. You actually did it. Kenneth laughed. I did. His dad pulled him into a hug. I'm proud of you. Then he hugged me too. Welcome to the family. His mom finally found her voice. I have approximately 1,000 questions. Kenneth grinned. I figured. Were you at least somewhere romantic? We looked at each other, then burst into laughter. His dad frowned. What? Kenneth wiped tears from his eyes. We got lost. You what? In Yosemite. His mom blinked. You proposed while you were lost? Kenneth nodded. Pretty much. There was a long silence. Then she started laughing so hard she had to lean against the wall. I should have known. His dad shook his head. Only you. 6 months later, we stood together in a small botanical garden surrounded by our closest friends and family. Nothing extravagant, nothing over the top. Just the people who had been there through every chapter of our story. The officiant smiled. You've written your own vows? We both nodded. Kenneth insisted on going first. He unfolded a piece of paper, then looked up at me. I spent years believing the best thing that ever happened to me was meeting my best friend. He smiled. I was wrong. A few people laughed softly. The best thing that ever happened to me. He reached for my hands. Was realizing my best friend was also the love of my life. I couldn't stop smiling. When it was my turn, I looked at him and laughed quietly. I had pages prepared. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket, then set it aside. I'm not using them. Kenneth smiled. You sure? I've spent years trying to find the right words. I looked into his eyes. But they've always been simple. I squeezed his hands gently. You've been my favorite person since the day we got lost trying to find the engineering building. A few people laughed. I thought that was the best wrong turn I'd ever taken. I smiled. I was wrong too. I glanced down at the ring on my finger. The best wrong turn. I looked back at Kenneth. Was getting lost with you in the mountains. His eyes filled with tears again. Because every wrong turn with you. I smiled. Has somehow led us exactly where we were supposed to be. The officiant looked between us with a smile. I now pronounce you husbands. Kenneth didn't wait another second. He kissed me as our families applauded around us. For years, we thought our story was about two best friends who accidentally fell in love. Looking back, it was never accidental. It was simply two people finding their way to each other, sometimes through crowded graduation ceremonies, sometimes through quiet family barbecues, sometimes by getting hopelessly lost in the middle of a forest. But every road, every detour, every wrong turn led us home.